your host for this presentation. Also in the room is John Charnley, also with the British Council, like myself. Our two presenters today, Santi Budilastari is a PhD student in linguistics at Lancaster University. Her PhD research investigates the operationalization of integrated reading into writing construct in rating scales and its impact on validity. She holds an MA in ELT in testing and assessment from the University of Warwick. Her research interests include second language writing assessment, integrated language tasks, and rater cognition. Cecilia Setiawati Halimi is a senior lecturer in the Department of Linguistics, Faculty of Humanities, University Indonesia. She earned her BA in Linguistics from Universitas Indonesia, her MA in ELT from the University of Warwick, and her PhD in ELT from La Trobe University in Australia. Her field of interest include language assessment, English for specific purposes, English language teaching and teacher education, and she has facilitated various teacher training workshops on various ELT topics. She has been an active member and the vice president of the Association of Teaching English as a Foreign Language in Indonesia since 2003. All right, ladies, over to you.
Okay, well, thank you, Jen. Well, hello, everyone. Good evening, good morning, and good afternoon for those who are in Asia. In the next 25 minutes, Santi and I are going to present the results of our study about teachers' use of writing rating scales of a high-stakes test. Let me start by providing you with some background information. This study was conducted in Indonesia, where test preparation programs for high-stakes tests are on the rise. I believe that this phenomenon is not only true in Indonesia, it's also true in educational contexts around the world. These test preparation programs can take various forms. Sometimes it's very short, for a few hours only, and sometimes it can last for months. These test preparation programs often involve administering mock exams and giving students score prediction. The problem is teachers teaching these programs are often not accredited examiners, and they receive little to no training on how to use these rating scales. Therefore, their practice is expected to vary. The question is, to what extent do they vary? Both of us were interested in finding out the answer to this question. The reason was, although these predicted scores are of no actual use, they are low stakes, they have some consequences. For example, participants often use the predicted score to indicate their readiness to take the actual test. Let's move to discuss the context and purpose of the study. As I mentioned earlier, this study was conducted in Indonesia in one language centers that offered different kinds of test preparation program. This study only involved IELTS preparation, only involved teachers of IELTS preparation programs. But in this center, there are a lot of parallel IELTS preparation programs. So we really want to learn how teachers understand the IELTS preparation, the public version of IELTS writing rating scales. The two purposes of our study are, first, to understand how teachers of IELTS preparation program use the public version of IELTS writing rating scales. And the next one is, we plan to design evidence-based teacher rater training. The rationale for this is that it is important for teachers to have similar understanding of writing scales. There are two purposes why it is important for teachers to understand the rating scales well. This will guarantee that they will give better score prediction, and they will have better understanding of the test construct. As Nock explained, rating scales are the de facto test construct. So with better understanding of test constructs, teacher will be able to teach to the construct, not merely teach to the test. The research question, the main research question of this study is, how do teachers of IELTS preparation classes use the public version of IELTS writing rating scales? This question were addressed in two research questions. The first one is, what is teachers' rating performance in terms of severity, leniency, consistency, and bias? And the second question is, how do teachers perceive their own practice using the two rating scales? Santi is going to explain the methods of this study.
All right, okay, thank you, Cecilia. So to address the research questions outlined earlier, we devised this methodology which involved collecting two data sets. So the first one is the rating data that we collected from 24 teachers teaching IELTS preparation program. And they marked 220 scripts written by 110 students responding to two tasks. And this data was then analyzed using many-facet Rasch measurement. It's an extension of Rasch measurement modeling using facets. And the results of this data analysis were used to address research question 1 concerning severity or leniency level, consistency, and bias. And our second data collection method is questionnaire. So we sent out a questionnaire to all the teachers, to all the 24 teachers participating in the first data collection. Unfortunately, we only received responses from 12 teachers, so it was 50% of the total number. And the questionnaire data was then analyzed using descriptive statistics and content analysis, and we used the results to address research question 2. So prior to processing the data, the rating data, we did what we call data preparation. And we found something interesting, as you can see here, that about half of the raters, about 13 of the raters in our study, actually, sometimes they awarded half marks or half bands to the writing performances, despite the fact that half marks or half bands are actually not in the rating scales. So initially we collected 2,640 data points, but unfortunately 476 of them were half bands, so we had to exclude them from our data analysis. So we were left with 2,164 valid data points, or around 82% of the data. So we initially thought perhaps we should have told these teachers to only use whole bands or whole scores. But then we realized what we really wanted to know was actually how they normally use the rating scales. So then we felt this is actually an interesting finding in itself, and we shall come back to this one later when we discuss the results to research question 2. So let me now share with you the results concerning research question 1. The first one is about teacher rater severity or leniency. If you're familiar with Rasch, so the 24 raters in our study were mapped onto a single measurement scale. This one, it's more like a ruler, to put it simply. And the unit of measurement is called logit. So we've got, for example, -3 here, -2, and so on. And the numbers here actually represent the 24 raters that were involved in our study. And as we can see here, we've got rater number 22 at the very bottom. So rater 22 was the most lenient in the group, while rater 3 was the most severe in the group. and raters 1, 19, and 24 were around the group average, the group severity average. So from this visualization alone, we can see that their severity leniency level varied quite extremely, to be honest. And yes, so the raters were spread over 3.7 logits, so quite a wide range. And to understand it better, we can take a look at this index. We call it a rater separation index or strata, which is above 7, and the reliability of separation is 0.97, which means that the 24 raters in our group could be reliably separated in terms of severity or leniency into 7 different distinct levels. So that's interesting finding, but it's not surprising considering the fact that these raters are not accredited raters of IELTS, and some of them did receive some training, but many of them didn't receive any training on how to use the rating scales. And in terms of consistency, this is another measure or indicator of rater performance. This is probably a bit comparable to intra-rater reliability, which indicates how reliable or how consistent a rater is with him or herself. And we found in our study that 22 raters, or above 90% actually, were within the acceptable range of consistency. So in terms of consistency, it's quite good. They are quite consistent, like most of them. We found one rater, however, was inconsistent. It was rater number 5 here. And one rater was found to be overly consistent, possibly indicating a halo effect or central tendency effect. So when a rater exhibits a halo effect, this might show that this one rater perhaps could not really distinguish the different subscales or the different criteria in the rating scale. For example, for IELTS, there are 4 rating criteria: task achievement or response, depending on which task, coherence and cohesion, lexical resource, and grammatical accuracy and range. So a halo effect might indicate that this rater could not distinguish these different criteria in the rating scales. Or possibly also this one rater exhibited a central tendency effect, or the tendency to only use the middle bands. In IELTS, the bands range from 0 to 9, and this one rater was in fact tended to use the middle one, which was band 5, like more than the model expected. And we also investigated rater biases against tasks and rating criteria. And this one is the result of rater or teacher rater task bias. We found 5 raters were biased against certain tasks. And again, one of those raters is actually rater 5. Remember, the rater which was inconsistent. And then for rater rating criteria bias, we found 4 raters were biased against certain rating criteria. And again, rater number 5 is here. So these biases perhaps explain the inconsistency that rater number 5 exhibited that we discussed earlier. So in conclusion, our findings related to question 1 was that teacher rater severity or leniency extremely varied. So we've got one very, very lenient rater, and some of them were quite severe. And one teacher rater was inconsistent, and one was overly consistent. But from a measurement perspective, we are not so concerned with the overly consistent rater, but we are more concerned with the inconsistent one. And some raters, again, were biased against certain tasks or criteria. Now we shall move on to research question 2 findings. So in the questionnaire, we asked teachers to rate their confidence level in using the rating scales from 1 to 10, 1 being the lowest and 10 being the highest. So mind you, the the difference is actually quite small. So the graph look a bit misleading. I'm sorry for that. Yeah, so we found that they were more confident in rating task 1 than when using the rating scales to mark task 2. And we also asked them to rate themselves in terms of the severity or leniency level. So it's more like their perceived leniency or severity. And this is what we found. They found that they felt that they were more severe when marking task 2 performances. And we did ask them how they actually use the rating scales in their classroom. And from the responses, then we coded the responses, and these were 5 categories that emerged from the data. Goal setting, basically to familiarize students with the the skills that they need to focus on, the areas that they need to improve. We call it as goal setting. Some of the teachers also use the ratings to diagnose the strengths and weaknesses and also to provide feedback to their students. And as marking guidelines and standards, because they're aware that there are many parallel classes, that they need some sort of standards to mark the writing performances of their students, of course, to predict scores. And one teacher mentioned that they also use the rating scales for peer and self-assessment of their students. Due to the time, probably I'll just skip these. These are basically some quotes from the data. And they reported a number of challenges, and then again, we coded the challenges that they mentioned, and these categories emerged from the data. Again, use of half scores appeared again in the questionnaire responses. Interpreting descriptors, again, this is not surprising with the fact that they were not really trained in using the rating scales. Deciding between adjacent bands, and also the treatment of length of writing, like when the writing responses were either under or over the length expected. These are some of the examples. So, for example, this teacher mentioned there is no explanation whether students should be penalized if they write under or over the word limit. And several teachers also mentioned about how to use half scores. They felt that it's actually possible to give half scores, but it was quite challenging because they need to decide without really knowing what those bands with half scores actually mean, because there are no descriptors for that. So this is the conclusion. Probably I'll just highlight the last one regarding the challenges that we found. Thank you. Were not actually unique to the raters involved in this study. So the challenges are quite sort of common and have been reported in previous studies with raters and rater-mediated assessment. So things about interpreting descriptors or deciding on adjacent bands, or the treatment of features of writing which are extraneous to rating scale criteria or descriptors, things like what to do if the length of writing doesn't meet the criteria or the instruction in the prompt. So some follow-ups. What we plan to do, what we're currently doing is preparing for individualized feedback that we want to give to each of the teachers involved, informing them how they perform, like how lenient or how severe they are, whether or not they exhibit biases. We adapted the individualized feedback from NOC 2011 with some sort of changes to suit the context. And we also plan to design some sort of training informed by the findings from our study, and probably propose design to the language school administrators. What we hope is basically we have some sort of training in place, and when attending the training, the teachers have their report cards, so to speak, with them, so they know where they are and they know where they need to go. For example, if they're too lenient, they know they need to be more severe in their rating. So hopefully with that kind of feedback and more sort of evidence-based training, the training will become more effective in bringing the teachers together, especially in terms of their severity leniency level. Okay, that's all. Thank you very much. These are answers. Thank you. Jen, you're still muted.
Oh gosh. Yes, thank you. My apologies. So yes, thank you very much for a very interesting presentation. I've got one question from Linda. She's asking if it's a good idea to use the same rating scale that was used by the teachers for peer assessment.
Right, yeah. That's an interesting question because, of course, the rating scales, even the public version rating scales published by IELTS, perhaps contain a lot of sort of technical vocabulary, like lexical resource, which many learners might not be familiar with, right? But that's what the teachers use, and that's what's available, so to speak. I think it depends on how the teachers introduce the rating scales at the beginning. Of course, peer assessment is not something that we do suddenly. I mean, of course, the teachers need to familiarize the students first with what the different descriptors or what the different technical terms mean, like what lexical resource means, what grammatical range actually means. So I think it depends on how the teachers prepare the students to do the peer assessment or self-assessment. But yes, I think that's a very good point. Perhaps it needs to be some sort of simplify in terms of the language, because it's quite hard to understand for learners in general. Mm-hmm.
Okay, I've got one more question from Lucy. Will you use an IELTS accredited examiner to provide additional feedback to the teachers that might be useful for them?
Right, yeah, I think that's more like a suggestion. Yeah, yeah, that would be great. So we're probably considering some sort of help or support from IELTS partners in Indonesia. Maybe Cecilia has...
Well, actually, informally, we have ever had this kind of training by a certified IELTS raters. I think for our teachers, I think in Indonesia. So that's a good idea. I mean, to invite them to also, yeah, help the teachers to find out whether their rating is really as expected. Yeah.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, if I can add, some teachers did receive some sort of training, but not all of them. Yeah.
Okay, I have one more question here from, let's see, Brenda. Thank you for sharing, Cecilia and Santi. When you mentioned providing individualized feedback to raters, how much information do you give them? And do you share the data you just presented to your raters?
Yes, thank you for the question. Again, it's individualized, so we only shared information relevant to that particular teacher. So, for example, I showed you the ruler earlier. Okay. So, for example, this is one of the information, one of the pieces of information that we it's for C, so we put number 3 here, or the person's name, and then for the other numbers we just put asterisks or other sort of symbols, so they would know from this visualization that, okay, oh, I'm the most severe in the group. And we also provide sort of like this description, so descriptive comment, and highlighting what they need to focus on to improve their rating performance, or what they need to focus on when they attend the training later. So it's both some numbers, just a few numbers, statistics, not a lot, and descriptive comments, basically.
Okay. I don't see any more questions. If you don't mind, I actually have a question of my own on this particular slide.
Yes.
You've highlighted the rater separation index by strata rather than the normal rater separation one. I was wondering why you chose to go with the strata.
Yeah, actually, each number here indicates different things, but this one is, I think, sort of more understand, and it's more useful. And also because we've got the reliability for the second index here. So the reliability here, probably I should have mentioned earlier that the reliability here is not the inter-rater reliability, but this is the reliability for the separation. And this number 7 actually indicates that the 24 raters could be reliably separated into 7 different groups in terms of their severity level. Quite a lot. Maybe you imagine like, okay, like 24 teachers and they can be in 7 different groups, so they're very different. But actually, partly that could be explained by the fact that we've got a very, very lenient rater here. As you can see, it's here in terms of leniency, and there is nobody here. So we can say that rater 22 is a bit of an outlier. Yeah. So it's more, my short answer would be, it's a more sort of easier to interpret index, I would say.
Okay, thank you very much. I was wondering because it's quite similar to something that I've been doing lately as well. Okay, see, there is no more other messages. So thank you both very much for your presentation, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, we have the